The United States is one of the largest nations in the entire world by land mass, and this makes it arguably the most diverse nation in the world, not just politically, culturally, and economically, but also geographically, with many different regions being represented that look like entirely different nations if you just look at their geography and climate. With this being said, I think we can really classify the United States into different nations or sub-nations based off of their geographic region. One way to do so is by looking at the climate, specifically with rain and precipitation. One pattern in the United States is that the eastern part of the country receives significantly more precipitation than the western part of the nation. And also, the southern part of the United States is significantly more hot than the northern part of the United States, like any other country in the world. With that being said, there are many states in the United States that you could be putting in multiple regions. For example, the state of Kentucky, you could argue, is a northern state, while others would argue is a southern state. How I would do this is I would look at this part of the state which has developed the most, meaning the entire state developed around this one city. The city that was first developed in Kentucky was Lexington, Kentucky, and Lexington, Kentucky is also the capital of the state of Kentucky. So, considering how Lexington, Kentucky was the first part of Kentucky to really be developed, more so than Louisville, which was developed much more recently, I would argue that Lexington, Kentucky would place Kentucky as a part of the South rather than a part of the Midwest or the North because of how Lexington has a much more humid subtropical climate. So, you could really do this with any other state because other states could be viewed as parts of many regions, such as the state of Texas, where East Texas would be viewed as a part of the Deep South, North Texas and the middle part of Texas would be viewed as a part of the Great Plains, while Western Texas would be part of the Southwest. So, considering how you can't really neatly put each state into each territory, which is what I'm going to be trying to doing here, well, I'm going to be trying to neatly put each state in each region. The way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to look at where each state's primary city would be located in each geographic region. Also, you could really determine where each state is just based off of the landscape. For example, you could look at the Pacific Ocean as a part of the West, and you can also look at the Rocky Mountains as well as the desert. This is how I would most likely divide the West into three subregions. I would place California, Oregon, and Washington in the Pacific region, while I would put the states of Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico in the more desert region. There's a very dry climate in those states. You also see a lot of desert in those four states, with desert representing over 30% of the total land in those states. And then I would put Colorado, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana in the mountains region of the West. Next up, for the South, I would really divide it into two subregions, the Upper South and the Lower South, with the Upper South being characterized by tobacco, hemp, and other cash crops, while the Deep South being primarily characterized by cotton. Furthermore, there are some southern states that are really a mix of both the Upper and Deep South. For example, the state of Tennessee, where the western part of the state is really Deep South, considering how much cotton dominated the western part of the state, while the eastern and middle part of the states are much more upper south, with the far east region of Tennessee really being inhabitable for cash crops and plantations. Meanwhile, central Tennessee was more characterized by tobacco. So, with that being said, I split the South ultimately into three regions, with the Deep South, the Cotton South, being South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. Meanwhile, the more so Middle South would be Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, where cotton certainly did play a role in the economy in parts of these states, some of them more so than others, but also other cash crops also played a role. And then finally, the upper South, which would be Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Missouri, where it was really other cash crops rather than cotton that really dominated the economy of these southern states. But what all of these southern states have in common, though, that makes them really this part of this region is the presence of cash crops and specifically larger plantations. Now, for the north, I would ultimately divide the region into two regions, being the region west of the Appalachian Mountains and the region east of the Appalachian Mountains. For the region west of the Appalachian Mountains, also known as the Midwest, I would place it into two further subregions, being the Great Lakes region as well as the Great Plains region. The Great Lakes region would consist of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, while the Great Plains region would be Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota. The Great Plains states have historically and have now been far more rural and agricultural, while the Great Lakes states have been much more industrialized and urban and were part of the Rust Belt. And finally, for the remaining part of the northern states, which we haven't quite characterized yet, I would just divide them based off of temperature, with them being divided into a more cold region and a more warm and moderate region. And this would really be shown in this map with New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware all making up the mid-Atlantic. Meanwhile, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island would all be part of New England as they have been historically. So overall those are my regions of the United States. Those are each of my quote unquote smaller nations within the United States, being New England, the Mid Atlantic, the Upper South, the Middle South, the Deep South, the Great Lakes, the Great Plains, the Mountain West, the Desert West, and then the West Coast. So anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel.